I think everybody's here that's going to be here, so we'll go ahead and get started. If you were here in the last session, these first slides might be repetitive, so sorry about that. But a little bit about myself. I graduated from Iowa State. I've been doing web development for 7 and Drupal stuff for 4. I work in town at a place called Web Filings. It's a software company. Balance Scale Media is just a company that I started. Like any web developer, you have side projects, so you need some way to get taxed for doing that work. So that's what that's about. And I love JavaScript. So another thing I want to say in advance is that I don't consider myself an expert, but I do have a successful project that I launched and maintain for my company using Node.js, and so I just really want to share out of that experience. So hopefully that helps you in some way. Just an overview of stuff that we're going to go over and hopefully discuss as we go through. I just kind of want to break down what exactly Node.js is. I still feel like it's got a little bit of mystery wrapped around it, so I'll try to deal with that and understand why it's as fast as it is, what you can do with it, which is changing all the time, my experience working with it, and then how do we relate it to Drupal? How can we integrate it? How can we leverage that power within the Drupal community? So I like what Chris said this morning about just being, a community that discusses things. So I want to encourage you guys to just ask questions whenever you want to. You don't have to necessarily raise your hand or anything. Just speak, and we'll talk. So addressing what is Node. I'm not a graphics designer, so my slides are pretty ugly. But this is the best I could do. So V8 is one piece of it. V8 is a JavaScript runtime engine that Google developed for Chrome, with the intention of they had this ongoing what would you call it? They really want to speed up the web in any way that they can, and they've done that from everything to sharing their public CDN of common JavaScript libraries, creating Google page speed to help you guys, help us measure how fast our sites are so we can make them faster. And Google Chrome was part of that initiative to say, hey, let's make the web faster by improving the browser, and hopefully that'll influence other browser vendors to make their browsers faster. So they poured a lot of engineering dollars into V8, and it's extremely fast JavaScript runtime engine. So what is the story behind Node? Basically, this guy named Ryan Dahl works for a company called Joyent, and he had a requirement for one of his projects to come up with something that could handle asynchronous I/O for the web. And he looked at several different things with Ruby and with PHP, and none of those projects really fit the bill for what he needed. So the reason that he chose JavaScript was that it didn't have an I/O API at all. So it was free to just write one for it. And he could write exactly what he needed. And he worked with V8 because V8's already extremely fast. So libuv is what he wrote to kind of be sort of a wrapper around V8. And then there's some other libs involved there. But libuv, as far as I know, is just an open source project that can be forked, and so that's cool that it's that open. So here is a hello world code for Node.js. I remember the first time I looked at the code like this, it was sort of mind-blowing in a way, because I'm used to a LAMP stack. So I'm used to okay, let's go to Apache and let's listen to this port and let's point at this web root. And then in my PHP script, I'm writing, echo or print hello world. So there's this separation between the web server and the scripting language. And in Node.js, they're one and the same. So that's sort of a world changer in how you think about writing these codes. Like we're creating a server, we're listening to port 8000, and then we're responding to the request all in 5 lines of code. So that's pretty amazing. Create server, I should point out, is part of libuv. This isn't, if you've ever worked with JavaScript, this isn't, a native function. So this is part of the wrapper code that he wrote so that it can be used on the server. So we kind of discussed V8 already, why it's so fast. JavaScript in and of itself is event-driven, so that plays to an advantage on the web in that not everything is linear and sequential in how JavaScript is going to handle stuff. It's very, we're used to, in the DOM, click events and all this stuff, but on the server, these events can be exploited for handling all kinds of stuff, defining custom events for whatever, file uploads, or and then the asynchronous I/O or asynchronous I/O basically means stuff can be read and write at the same time. So speed. So this list is going to expand, like even as we're sitting here, because there's so many different companies that are interested in Node. But it handles UDP, TCP. I've seen all sorts of simple examples of writing a telnet server, writing echo server, streaming stuff. A lot of companies initially used Node to offload the download process from their sites. They didn't want their servers to get bogged down with serving file streams, so they delegated that to Node to really speed up their web traffic. And this last line, serving web pages, when I first looked into Node, I was like, no way you would use it for that. Like, why? That doesn't make any sense. But now there's frameworks like Express that, I think of Express as sort of like, if you've looked at PHP micro frameworks, it's that same sort of coding, only it's in Node. So you're serving HTML from Node, or whatever you want to serve. Take this. I wasn't sure how to represent this graphically, so take this with a grain of salt. But this just means, hey, these are optional. Lambda stack we're used to. Okay, we got Linux, we got our web server, we got another service that's our relational database. Our scripting language is going to be talking to those through the driver. Node, Node can just sit on top of Linux, and in and of itself, it can handle SSL certificates, it can handle sessions, any stuff that we can dream of. The data store, I tried to be generic because there's all sorts of stuff. You can use Redis, you can use MongoDB. There's even MySQL drivers for Node, which is weird, but they're there. Proxy. So here's one thing that Node is not good at. It's really not good at gzipping and compression, like static files. So it's not really something that you want to be serving JavaScript or CSS or images, because it's just going to take. You can implement gzipping in Node.js, and if you guys aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, like in Apache, it's like enabling the deflate module, where it's like let's encode this and squish it down so when we send it out, it doesn't take as much bandwidth and it speeds things up. Node is not good at that. So what people typically do is they'll use a front end like Nginx or even Apache to serve the static files, and then anything that's not a static file, push it up to Node to handle the request. So I'll get into how I launched my own project and how that looks in a little bit. Well, I guess it's the next slide. So for the company that I work for, Web Filings, I got a project to do basically a mobile intranet site. We're a cloud-based company. The problem that I needed to solve was we have all of these software as a service providers that we use to help our company run fast. So we have all of this data that's pertinent to our company and all of these different providers. So we needed something that's very, very accessible that can kind of aggregate that data together. So we looked at using Symfony, I think, originally, but Symfony is kind of a hard nut to crack if you're just jumping into it. And one of the things that we wanted to use was Socket.io, which, if we were going to go with PHP, we would have to have 2 servers, right? We'd have to have PHP to serve whatever, and then Node would have to handle the socket. So my thought was, hey, why don't we use Node for everything, and then we're only dealing with 1 server. So here's what my stack looked like. We got the browser up front, and the reason that I wanted to include the browser in this kind of layout is all the communication that I care about it as a developer is happening in JSON, which, you know, I love JavaScript, so to me that's like super exciting. This is the setup that I was talking about earlier. You have Nginx that's just proxying requests up to Node if they're not static files. If they're static files, Nginx is really, really good at serving static files, gzipping them, and I also offloaded handling like the SSL certificate to Nginx. But you know, Node could handle it too. And then MongoDB is what I use for my data store. And then just sort of a rough, hey, this is what it would look like in LAMP. You know, this, instead of a JSON REST request between the browser and the server, it would be, you know, HTTP request and then the driver for PHP. So just to kind of process like, whoa, this is how it looks like. So my experience working with Node, pros and cons, I didn't really have a lot of time to think of all the pros, all the cons, so I just like, here's the first things that came to my mind. NPM is the package manager for Node. If you're going to set up an existing Node project for whatever reason, if you're, say you find something on GitHub that you want to try out, it's probably going to be built with NPM. It's just a really, really nice way of handling all of these different, think about Drupal and all the different contributed modules that you can use. You can think about it that way. Packages in Node are to Node.js what modules are to Drupal. And NPM provides a mechanism in which to download those, to manage versions of those. So what it looks like to install a Node project is, you know, GitHub clone, you know, pull down the code, jump into that directory and just do npm install -d. Install the dependencies, and then you're up and running. That's given that you have, you know, Node and npm set up already. So npm package manager is pretty much like standard. There's no other, you know, if you're like thinking about package managers for like Mac, you know, there's Mac ports and several others. Trying to think of one. Homebrew, if you guys yet. Well, there's no alternatives for Node. It's just npm rocks, and that's what people use. I found there to be really good documentation on Node.js like core stuff from the main site, and I mean, it's truly a really, really fast framework. So I mean, using Google PageSpeed to kind of measure how fast my site was, that was pretty easy for me to get up to a 94 score on PageSpeed, which was awesome. And then, you know, on my local, if I'm just running Node.js local, I'm seeing like millisecond, you know, page loads for the initial server response. So, which is cool. The cons, community is sort of like a really loose word, but I think of community in terms of what Drupal has and what Node has, and Drupal is so much more rich in community than Node is at this point. Working with Node frame. Oh, so here's the trade-off. The project that I built, we really wanted the server to be as slim as possible so that it would be very, very fast. So we chose Node.js Express framework. And while as a JavaScript developer, I really loved it, at the same time, I work with Drupal a ton, and I'm so used to having all the nice things just built in, like, there's this need to, we need analytics on who's using this, who's online right now. Well, I don't know, I have to go build that. Or some other things. Just the admin, within Drupal is so powerful and helps you manage content, your users, everything, permissions. None of that stuff exists. It might. I think it will. I've seen a single project for Node that was basically they were trying to replicate everything that Drupal was doing in core in Node, which there's not a lot of backing behind that, but it was interesting. No, it had no association with Drupal. It was just a guy that really liked Drupal that said, hey, I want to do all this stuff in Node, and I want to see if I can pull it off. So there is a lot of discussion about Node within the Drupal community, and I don't know a lot of the specific discussions, but basically it's either we ignore Node, or we embrace Node, or we should totally switch Drupal to Node. But I think as web developers, we're always kind of weighing, okay, here's all the tools that we have available, which for better or for worse, we have a ton of tools as well to web developers. We have tons of really good frameworks, tons of really good platforms, so sometimes it's really hard to decide. So just deciding what's the best, what's your use case, what are you trying to build, and then using the right things. So let's talk about the Node.js integration module. I got a chance to meet the guy that originally wrote it. He has a YouTube video that he posted about the module after you originally wrote it. It just kind of shows what it does, and basically what he was trying to use it for was there's a project for Node called Socket.io. Is anybody familiar with sockets? So sockets are basically, instead of a broken request response, sporadic communication with the server, this is sort of a lockdown. Here's a channel for you to communicate back and forth with me at any time on. Sockets are, if you do server-side, if you do Java development, sockets are a common thing. They're just not commonplace between the client and the browser because this stuff has never existed before. But Socket.io brings that now, and what that allows the server to do is basically to do push notifications. Like, instead of the client always asking for something, the server can create this socket connection with all the clients that it has sessions with and broadcast messages to all, or just do these singular pushes to an individual client. So his idea was, hey, let's build a module that leverages that. And he provides an example where he's got 3 different browsers open with 3 different sessions, and then he's the admin on a 4th browser, and he just says, hello, broadcast message, whatever. I think there's a drush hook for it now. And then you'll just see, if you've ever seen JGRAL messages, the little messages that just kind of pop up in the top right, he'd see that on all 3 browsers immediately. You'd see that that notification because there's a socket connection between all 3. So really cool. And obviously that kind of thing doesn't have to be little messages that you broadcast. Events can trigger page changes, file downloads, anything that you could kind of think of. But this is how basically it works. So between the client, Node, and Drupal, we're setting up a Node server that's going to run independent of Drupal. Drupal and Node are going to trust each other because there's a security token there that they're passing back and forth to say, hey, you're allowed to talk to me. And then Node's going to handle all of the socket communication, and then Drupal's going to handle all of the HTTP requests. So what this looks like for the client, like if you were to like inspect the page with Firebug, you'd see a little socket.io script file that's attached to the page. And if you did like the network monitoring little panel in Firebug, you'd see these little pull requests that all that is just socket.io just saying, yep, just checking in, making sure the connection's cool. So that whole mechanism is just to allow the push notifications. So the idea of this is embracing the power of Node.js and then embracing the power of Drupal and using them both for what they're really good at. So that's why that module exists. Another kind of buzz phrase in the web is real-time applications, and that's all because of the socket, right? We don't have to wait. We don't have to keep asking for stuff. We have a constant connection to the server, and this looks like any number of things for depending on what you want to build. But some people use it for like real-time analytics, so they can see in real time users doing stuff on their site. But we have yet to see all the cool stuff that it could do. So I'm running low on slides, so that means we need to discuss more things here. Some cool resources. What's been fun about what's all the stuff that's happening with JavaScript, at least from this session on Node.js, the previous session on Backbone, is a lot of people are just taking it upon themselves to like do these collaborative open source books, and so there's lots of them for Node, just like I pointed out the one for Backbone in the last session. But I've read a few of those, and they're definitely helpful. So I just ran into this blog post here, that 7 free Node.js ebooks. I've read a few of those and would recommend them. I just found a podcast for Node called Node Up, and I'd recommend checking it out. Some of the guys that either have written like hundreds of packages for Node, or are really close to just contributing code to Node. A lot of those guys are frequents on that podcast, so it's kind of cool to hear what direction things are going, what new features to expect with Node. I know they just had a new release not too long ago that was supposed to be pretty significant in terms of performance, which is insane because it's already fast. But so with that, I kind of want to hear from you guys questions or
So code samples?
Code samples?
Yeah.
No, I don't have any sweet demos or anything like that. What I could show you is I wish we had.
You don't want to do a live demo in front of everyone?
Hey, I'm not afraid of live demos at all, but I started preparing for this at the beginning of the week and did my Backbone stuff, and I'm like, oh, I don't have a lot of time.
How about the website?
So, like I said, that is basically a mobile intranet. So, I can't show you sensitive company information. Unfortunately, you can speculate as to whether I even wrote that project. So check out. I used Express Framework for Node. The model that we followed was LinkedIn Mobile. So their development team is really awesome, and they've done a lot of cool blog posts on what they did with their mobile suite. Basically, they have a web experience, an iPad experience, iPod experience, and they're all serviced by Node. And they use a ton of other new stuff like Backbone. And so we had a lot of the same project requirements for that as they did for their mobile stuff. So we just use the same technology stack almost as they. I don't know if they use MongoDB, but yeah. Yep.
What are you guys using for data storage on your project? Like, are you doing Mongo, Scope, or something like that? Or?
We're using Mongo.
What's that experience been like for you?
Actually, it's been really easy. There's a native MongoDB driver for Node.js that works just great. There's also a Node package called Mongoose that is called an ODM, like Object Document Management or Mapping. And so that supports like schemas and validation for data. So I used Mongoose because it created sort of a simple wrapper for connecting to the database. One of the things that you want to be careful with is like if you've done JavaScript development before, there's always like these race conditions, like timing of things coming in because it's event driven. So you just have to be mindful of when the database connection has been made. One of the cool things about Mongoose is that if you start firing queries against MongoDB and the server connection's not there yet, it queues them up and then runs them for you. So that's a cool way around it. Otherwise, I ran into cases where I was trying to access it directly, and the connection wasn't made, so just nothing happened. And then it took me a little while to debug that. But the cool thing is the data retrieval that I'm doing for all these services. I basically just dump them into collections in Mongo, and I love the fact that there's no data processing that I need to do. When the JSON comes in from whatever service that I'm getting data from, I can dump it directly into MongoDB with an insert, and it knows, oh, an array of objects means I'm going to create all these new documents. So very cool.
Do you have any suggestions for like someone who's going to JavaScript from like a PHP direction? Like, I'm used to like the model that you had up there was that you have the specific lamp stack. If you've been for a while, even PHP for a while, you kind of have a set process of thinking of how things work. The synchronous type of top down. You call something at the top, then your function later can manipulate whatever that function versus like the asynchronous idea. Do you have any suggestions of how to think in the asynchronous JavaScript type methodology when it comes to building with nodes?
Well, there was I found something recently that you should know. So if you're used to working with JavaScript on a client, you'll know that JavaScript is really weird in how it handles blocks. So or scoping, it's different. Like functions define a block and they have a scope. So if you define a variable, within that scope, then it won't be accessible outside of it. So JavaScript is it cherry picks, which blocks have a scope and which don't. So I was used to take a click event handler in JavaScript, where you would, or like an AJAX request. Say you define a variable before you make your AJAX request, and then you want to use that variable in the response. If you're within an object, then you want to you want to define some reference that's not this, So when you come back, because when you get the response, this is going to be the function. It's not going to be the object that you called from. So I was used to writing these references so that I could reference them later. But the thing that I learned about Node is that this always refers to the global Node.js object. So I can't remember what I ran into an issue with. I was creating a pseudo class, and then I was using this within it. And instead of it referring to my object, which is what I was expecting to access this member function, it was referring to Node's global object. And so it's like, oh, this function isn't defined, server crash. So that was sort of a head scratcher, and some differences in scoping between JavaScript on the client and JavaScript on the server. So, another thing to think about too with JavaScript is, PHP, you're used to things running linearly top to bottom. JavaScript is very event driven, so you'll write some function in the middle of, say, an executable up here, and then in PHP you're used to, okay, this is going to run, and that's going to run, and this is going to run. In JavaScript, it depends on when your event happens, but that code, say you have your event-driven code right here, you have two executables above and below. Well, those executables are going to go and be done. That event-driven code is just going to wait until that event happens. So, just thinking of things in terms of events, rather in terms of just top to bottom sequential order. Anything else? Do I have any? Maybe I had something. Oh, here's some stuff to talk about. So Node.dev is a sweet npm package that you can use, and basically, if you edit any of your Node code, so here's the difference between PHP and Node that you can hang on to. So PHP is going to compile on the fly, which is what we're used to JavaScript doing in the browser. But for Node, you got to restart your Node server. So that becomes a pain if you're like, I changed this little tweak in the file, and then I got to go stop my server, Control C, up and then or Tab and press Enter. What Node.dev does is it listens to changes to your files and then reboots the server for you. So you can do this active development, and then it's just rebooting for your changes. Forever is a monitoring app for, like, if you're deploying a Node server, and it's sort of like a safety net. Like, you don't want your Node service to just go down and you not know about it. So what Forever does is just it monitors the Node process and kicks it up. If anything goes wrong, and it totally bails, and it'll just kick the service back up again, so that you have a consistent, or you have constant availability. Basically, is what it promises. There's also a Linux software called Monad, I think, that people use on other web servers and stuff that you can use for that too. Underscore is a really powerful array library that is actually a dependency for Backbone, but there's a package that you can use it on in Node, right? A lot of JavaScript frameworks that really don't have anything to do with the DOM in particular can be used in Node. So that's a cool thing to think about too. Passport is an authentication suite. So because the project that I worked on was in internet, we needed some authentication piece on the front end to even get into it, and we use OneLogin to manage a lot of passwords and stuff between different softwares and service providers. So we needed a SAML integration, and it turns out that there's like zero support for SAML in Node. So I wrote, talking to the guys with OneLogin, I wrote my own SAML integration for Node, and I posted it on GitHub, and I love open source. The guy that works on the Passport suite said, hey, like the work that you did on SAML, can we incorporate it into Passport? And I said, yes, that'd be awesome. So among a ton of different OpenIDE, all sorts of stuff, Passport supports SAML now. Bouncy is another cool project. It's basically super lightweight request router. So you can. Some people use it for if you want to do very specific ports for specific services. Bouncy would be a really cool way to do that. You can say, "Oh, a request is coming in for this. Then I'm going to route you to this port on, whatever you want to do." So these are places to find me. Yeah. So my side project. This is the website for that. I basically use this as a tech blog. So anytime I solve a problem that really, really bugged me, I post to my blog and share that information with other people. So there's stuff in there about Node, there's stuff in there about Backbone, and so you can follow that if you want. We're pretty close to time. Is any other questions about? John Van Dyke was just talking to me about, hey, are you gonna have a sweet demo where you like transcode video and like, I wish. I'm sure there's a Node package for that, but there's a lot of packages that actually tap into C++ libraries. So I mean, there's all sorts of crazy stuff that you can do. All right, that's a wrap.